I was on a business trip. It was a business conference, and that's where I found out that I was pregnant. I was so excited, I couldn't wait to tell my husband. I was about to leave the conference to go straight home, leaving a day early just to let him know. But that's when my mother-in-law frankly calls me on the phone and says that she has some devastating news, and you guys will not believe what it was. I've heard ladies in the past say that they would rather get married to a broke guy whose mother was dead than get married to a guy from a rich background with a mother who was alive. I always frowned at such a statement. I can even recount several occasions where I fell out with a friend of mine for advising me along the lines. It was not until I crossed paths with my husband Gerald that I got to understand why these ladies had such a mindset. If, as a lady, you ever make the mistake of getting married to a guy with a terrible mother, just kiss your peace of mind goodbye because, well, you're done. Gerald and I met during my second year in college, and we've stayed together ever since. Gerald studied business management, and it came in handy because he went to work in his family business shortly after. His family owned several textile industries, and the business is managed by his mother because his father is immobile and spends most of his days at home. I, on the other hand, am a full-stack developer, and though I'm doing pretty well, there's a lot to achieve, and Gerald has been very supportive. Gerald proposed to me 3 years after I graduated from college, and I could tell he was the right guy for me because we've been together for a long while. I said yes, and he decided it was time I met his family. I tried putting up a great impression during my first visit. Gerald's family received me very well, but I did not let my guard down since I knew the purpose of the meeting was to properly scrutinize me. His mother asked me about myself and what I did. I excitedly gave them a brief overview of my background, but spent most of the time talking about my career and how I derive satisfaction from it. My would-be in-laws listened with rapt attention as I spoke, and Gerald's father noted he was impressed with the career path that I've chosen and the vision which I had. Gerald's mother then cleared her throat, and I listened carefully for what she had to say, but rather than a statement, she asked a question that would create a rift between us. She asked if I was going to resign from my job or after the marriage. I was confused by the question because Gerald knew I had no intention of being a stay-at-home wife. We talked about this, and he was my biggest fan when it came to pursuing my career. I responded to his mother that I would keep on working even after we married, as I did not want to just sit at home. She noted that she was not implying that I would not work, but I would be working at the family firm, of course, and she then asked when I would be resigning. Before I gave my answer, she noted that I would be earning better than I did at my current place of work. I could not resign from my work. My career path did not in any way align with the family business. It was not like they needed a full-stack developer in the textile industries. I thanked Gerald's mother for the job opportunity, but noted that I did not just work for money, but for the inner satisfaction that I derived from it. She turned to Gerald and asked if he was really in support of what I was saying. Gerald was about to reply to her when his father immediately waded in on the matter. He noted that I did not need to work in the family business if I didn't want to. He went ahead to ask his wife to let the issue be. I observed that Gerald's mother kept quiet throughout my remaining stay at the house. She was offended, and it spoke a lot about her controlling nature. Gerald visited me 3 days later, and he spent nights at my place, and he was scared his mother's attitude towards me may have altered my decision to get married to him, but I noted, oh no, it did not. He told me his father had further rebuked his mom after I left, and he pleaded that I just ignore his mom. I was not bothered so long as my man was standing by my side. If it were a situation where Gerald was his mother's puppet, then I would have ended the relationship without giving it a second thought. Gerald and I were in the shower the next morning when somebody began banging at the door. I was as though whoever it was wanted to pull it down. I grabbed a towel and quickly rushed to see who was at the door. I opened it, and to my surprise, it was Gerald's mother. How could she have known where I lived? She even walked in without an invitation and told me to stay away from her son because no marriage would be taking place. I asked her what the issue was, and she would rather die than watch her son get married to a lady who disrespected her the very first time that they met, and who was not ready to make sacrifices for the family. I knew her reason for accusing me of being disrespectful was that I was not willing to resign from my workplace. I apologized to her, though I was not in any way at fault, but she insisted I either resign from my job and join the family business or end the engagement to her son. I had not even married her son yet, and she was already disturbing my peace of mind. Gerald walked into the living room to see if everything was all right, and his mother was shocked and disgusted to find him there. He asked what she was doing there, but she answered his question by asking one of hers. She asked how he could do such a thing. Gerald asked what she meant, and she went on to ask, how could he choose to get married to the very woman who had embarrassed and disrespected her? Gerald was not willing to engage in his mother's little argument, so he simply told her to start accepting me, because nothing would deter him from getting married to me. His mother went on to claim that she was acting in his best interest because it would be difficult to keep tabs on me if he lets me work at a different place. She claimed I would use my work to live life however I wanted. Her words were not only embarrassing, but they were insulting. What did she mean by keeping tabs on me? Why would my husband keep tabs on me? I was very much offended, but I decided to keep quiet and let Gerald handle the situation, and thankfully he did just that. He told his mother that he would not tolerate her painting the woman he was engaged to as, well, certain words. He then asked her to leave my home. We had our wedding shortly after, and though Gerald's mother was present, she never stood up from her seat, except when she stood to leave. She was busy chatting away with a woman, Miss Eunice, who I would rather learn had been her friend even before she got married to Gerald's father. Her attitude created awareness among the guests who were present that she was not in support of the wedding at all. I knew she was not happy with me, but I did not expect that she would behave like that in the view of everyone. Well, we ignored her and left for our honeymoon right from the wedding venue. Gerald and I spent 2 weeks enjoying our lives as a couple, and we returned to his family home. We had a place of our own, but we had decided to spend a week at his family's house, so I could get acquainted with his family. He had asked me to channel my energy more into bonding with his other siblings and his father because he rightfully guessed his mother would give me a hard time. Well, I decided I was going to try either way, as I felt my mother-in-law would view me differently now I was legally married to her son and a member of the family. The day we got to his family house, his entire family was in the parlor, and all of them, except for his mother, were anticipating our arrival. I greeted my father-in-law and went straight to where my mother-in-law was to greet her, but she kept her face fixed on the TV in front of her. I greeted, but she snubbed me like I was not even there, and my father-in-law, who was observing his wife's attitude, called her attention to the fact that I was greeting, her, and that's when she lousily responded to my greeting without even looking at me. My father-in-law was irritated at this point and told her that his son, Gerald, was now a man and had made the decision to get married to me, so it's high time that she got in touch with reality and quit trying to control his life. My mother-in-law was not happy with the rebuke, and she just stood up and walked on all of us. Gerald's sisters, in a bid to douse the embarrassment which their mother had just served me, all rallied around and established conversations. My husband and I talked that night and told him that I was going to visit his mother at work that day, so I could have a heart-to-heart talk with her. Gerald asked me not to bother, but I insisted. His mother left the house very early the next morning, and I waited till noon before I left the house to go see her. I went with lunch, which was her favorite meal that I've taken time to prepare. I got to the factory and headed straight to her office. I was about to knock on her door when I heard chattering with somebody inside, and oh boy, she was angry. I was curious to hear what they were talking about, so I did it. I eavesdropped before announcing my presence, and I heard some pretty shocking things which sent cold chills down my spine. My mother-in-law was talking to Madame Eunice, and she was ranting about her husband. She quoted what she had said the previous day about his son, and she mocked him by saying he was claiming Gerald as his son, like his entire attempt to produce a boy. I can't remember the exact words she used, but they were suggestive of the fact that Gerald was not the son of his father. Madame Eunice then advised my mother-in-law to do her best in overlooking her husband, since she had him where she wanted him. She then went on to give my mother-in-law the best means to enact revenge, using her husband's money to sustain her lifestyle and those of her lovers. Madame Eunice then used my father-in-law's condition to make a joke, and they both laughed. I knew at once that my mother-in-law did not love her husband, because no woman who did would verbally tear her husband to shreds. I had several questions, and one of them was why Gerald's father had gone ahead to marry her, because the signs would have been there from the start. I returned home after hearing the things which I heard, and I did not know what to make of it. I got to the house, and Gerald saw the meal that I packed for his mother still completely untouched. He asked if she rejected it, but I noted that I was not bold enough to talk to her, and that's why I returned. I didn't tell him what I learned. I just kept it to myself and decided to investigate the matter, just to be sure I did not hear wrongly. So, I opened the discussion with Gerald that night, where I asked him about how his parents met and got married. He told me the story, which was what his father had shared with him, and judging from what I heard earlier that day, I knew Gerald's father was correct. His dad was born into a prosperous family that had a business, which he would later inherit. He had met with Gerald's mom and a few dates. Well, she ended up pregnant. He did not want to settle down at the time, and he was not sure that she was even the one that, he wanted to get married to. But when pregnancy was introduced into the mix, he had to yield, and Gerald was born. Gerald told me that his father had overtold him that if he knew his mother's attitude was that bad, he probably would not have gotten married to her. After listening to my husband speak, I suspected from what I discovered that she had probably gotten pregnant for someone else and just pinned it on Gerald's dad. We were supposed to stay at his family house for 1 week, but I suggested to Gerald that we stay an extra week, and this was because I wanted to discreetly carry out a DNA test. I got close to my father-in-law, and I would sometimes attend to him. It allowed me to get a used tissue from him, and I also got a hairbrush which had been used by my husband, and I sent the samples of the lab to the DNA test. The results came back, and it showed that my husband is not the biological son of his father. I can't describe the way I felt. My perception about my father-in-law and mother-in-law was negatively altered, and the desire to win her approval was gone. I knew something which could disturb the peace of the family, and I did not know if it was the right thing to do. I kept my findings to myself, and before our stay was over, I resumed my job. My boss immediately shortlisted me as one of the 3 personnel who would go to one of the startup branches in our other part of the city. I discussed it with my husband, and we agreed that he would stay at his parents' place till I returned. He went to inform his parents about the recent development, and his mother, who had never been avoiding me before, all of a sudden wanted to pick interest. She commented on me barely being married and already finding excuses to put distance between me and my husband. She said that it was the very reason that she had insisted I resign from my job and join the family business, because then Gerald would not have me use a job as an excuse. Standing there listening to Gerald's mother talk was tasking, because I had to hold myself back from saying the things that I knew. Here was a woman who had cheated on her husband, and things that I had heard indicated she was still cheating on him, and now he was in a wheelchair, but she still accused me of trying to use my job as an excuse to go and cheat on my husband? Gerald rebuked his mother for the remark that she had made, while his father, who was already fed up with her attitude over the years, just bowed his head in shame. Gerald decided there and then that he would be leaving the house and he would rather stay alone at our place, while awaiting my return than sleep under the same roof with his mother. His father, however, stopped him from leaving and then issued a warning to his wife to ensure a repetition never occurred again. Gerald then warned his mom that he would sever ties with her if she ever spoke ill about me again, and the whole thing made my mother-in-law further incensed me. Ugh. What Gerald and his father did not know was that it was perfectly okay to my mother-in-law that a lady who got married barely a month ago would want to cheat on her husband. After all, she had cheated on her husband before marriage, and once I got back from the trip, I would hire a private investigator to see what he could dig up about her. I have the proof of my mother-in-law's cheating lifestyle before her marriage to her husband, but once I confirm that it's still ongoing, I would have no other option than to speedily expose her because my father-in-law's wealth is now at stake. I'm currently on a business trip, but I'll be back in 2 weeks. Update number 1. I'd stayed 1 week on my business trip when I discovered that I was pregnant. I was overjoyed and I knew my husband and his family would be too, but I did not tell Gerald straight away. I wanted to keep the news till I got back so I could see the look on his face. My phone rang during one of those times, and when I took a look at the caller, it was my mother-in-law. I did not know why she was calling, but I was sure that it was not because she missed me, because if she had her way, she would make me disappear forever. I picked up the call and my mother-in-law began asking where I was, what I was doing. Her tone was harsh and her question did not make any sense because they were all aware that I was on a business trip. All the same, I gave her a slight reminder I'm on a business trip, just like I'd earlier noted, and she still asked what I was doing there. So I told her I did not understand her question because I didn't. What else would be done on a business trip if not matters that bothered business? She then asked me to continue sleeping around while my husband was fighting for his life. My mother-in-law hung up the phone before I could say anything, but her comment indicated something was wrong with my husband. It was surprising because we spoke just a few hours ago and I immediately called his mobile phone, but he wasn't answering. I called his sisters, but no one was answering, so I got into a panic and began making plans to quit my business trip no matter the consequences and come straight home. But my father-in-law reached out to me before I did. He said my husband had been involved in an accident, but he was currently stabilized. I cut my trip short and came home. I headed straight to the hospital where Gerald's family, except his mother and father, was already there. I was told that there was a little complication and he slipped into a coma. I did my best not to cry like he was already dead. I asked to see him, but it wasn't possible apparently till about 3 hours ago. I was finally allowed to see him and I broke down crying and his sister tried to console me. I spoke to Gerald and pleaded with him not to leave me and our unborn baby, which I'm carrying. I hope that he could hear what I said and the news of my pregnancy. It would be the catalyst in his recovery. His sister heard my pregnancy comment, but they could not ask me about it as it was simply not the time. They just focused on comforting me. My mother-in-law walked into the ward at the time and stood at the door for a few seconds while looking at me with utter disgust. She began blaming me and my business trip for the condition of her son. How would my presence have prevented the accident? Her daughters, who knew their mother all too well, encouraged me to leave the ward without saying a word to her. I'm currently at the house with my in-laws, and they've been nothing but very encouraging to me, all except my mother-in-law. Update number 2. I obtained a 1-month leave from work, and though it did not come with payment, it was okay by me. I've been spending my nights at the hospital with Gerald, while I came home in the mornings to freshen up and change clothes. My mother-in-law walked up to me this morning while I was preparing to take a shower, and she noted that she learned I was pregnant, and I answered yes, I was. She then said that there would be no congratulations coming from the family because of the jerk that I was carrying in my womb. He has no father now, and I was shocked and angry to hear her call my child fatherless. She knew she had offended me by her statement, but she noted she was unapologetic about it. She asked if I felt that they were stupid enough to be deceived by me. My mother-in-law claimed that I'd gone on a vacation with my lover for days, and after he had gotten me pregnant, I decided to pin it on her son. She then told me that as long as she lived, no fatherless child of hers would have to share the family inheritance. I was still trying to figure out the exact words to say, and when she walked out of the room, she was accusing me of doing something that she had done to her own husband. I was physically exhausted and my mother-in-law did not help the matter emotionally, so I just laid back on my bed and I quickly drifted off to sleep. I was awoken by one of Gerald's sisters, who came in to inform me, "Gerald is out of the coma." We immediately rushed to the hospital, and I felt seriously relieved to find my husband had not succumbed to the death, and I broke down in tears while we shared a hug. His mother, who stood there, rather than being grateful her son had gotten better, hissed at our display of affection and walked out of the ward. Gerald stayed in the hospital for the rest of the day so the doctors could monitor him, but he was cleared to go home the next day. We went to his family house as his family had insisted, and then I told him the news of my pregnancy, which his family was already aware of. Gerald could not hide his joy. It was like the news gave him strength and the purpose to get well speedily. I did not tell him about his mother's accusations because I did not want to start putting him through any form of stress. His mother did not share the same view with me. She gathered the entire family the next day for, quote, something that threatened their posterity. Everyone, including me, felt it had to do with the challenge in the family business, but I never knew my unborn child was the thing. My mother-in-law had the attention of everyone, and she told them that what she had been saying right from the time that she was saying it was now playing out before our eyes. Her opening comment left everyone in suspense, and she continued the whole suspense thing by saying that the survival of the entire family was being threatened. My father-in-law became tired of the whole suspense and asked her to get on with it. And that's when my mother-in-law said that she had gathered the family so they could talk collectively and asked me to get a DNA test. Of course, just to ascertain the paternity of my child, because the entire time I was away from home was spent with my lover, who was the owner of the pregnancy which I carried. Everybody looked at me to hear what I would say, and I don't know, I was speechless. I finally mustered courage to say it was a lie, but my mother-in-law insisted that I did the DNA test if I was so sure, since a DNA test would simply not hurt anyone. So, my father-in-law asked his wife if she had proof of what she was saying, and she said she knew my type of woman. Gerald immediately spoke on my behalf and said I would not do a DNA test as he trusted me completely. But I cut him off. I noted that I would be doing the test just to prove my innocence, but that would be after the child was born, as it would be difficult running the test while pregnant. Meanwhile, I asked my husband if we moved out of his family home, and he simply did not object. Update number 3. It's been months since my last update, and a few things are very interesting that happened, while more are probably yet to take place. To start with, Gerald and I are proud parents of a bouncing baby boy. The drama with my mother-in-law got me looking for ways to get back at her, and I remember that I'd wanted to hire a private investigator to follow up my mother-in-law. I finally did that moment that she had accused me of infidelity, and it took him a month before my delivery to get results. Though I was not surprised that my mother-in-law was a cheat. The result was embarrassing, and there was picture evidence of her frolicking with men the age of her son. I had my evidence, but waited till my son was born. My in-laws visited me at the hospital on my day that my son was born, and while everybody was excited about it, my mother-in-law looked at her child and noted that he did not look like my husband. She knew my husband would send her out, so she took her leave before she did. And she then stopped halfway and reminded me of that DNA test. I told her the test would be done immediately and the results would be outed before a week. Gerald's mom went ahead to announce to the whole family that she was hosting a party in a week to celebrate her grandson, in case he was hers. I knew the party was means to humiliate me, so I decided it's time to tell my husband everything I knew. Gerald could not hide the shame in his eyes when I showed him how adulterous his mother was. He asked if I was not making it up because my relationship with her was not the best, but I told him that was not the case. I then dropped the bombshell about his paternity, and Gerald froze at the realization that the man who he referred to as his father all his life was not his biological dad. He wanted to, go confront his mother right away, but I stopped him from doing so. I suggested we did that during the party she was organizing. I made Gerald understand that he had no other father figure besides the man that he had known all his life, as his father and DNA results would not change that fact. Final update. The party day finally arrived, and it was to be held at the family house. This was an in-house thing, so no guests were invited. Gerald and I arrived with our son when everyone had converged at the dining table, and my mother-in-law, upon seeing us walk in, requested we join them immediately. I greeted everyone, and I had barely settled down when my mother-in-law asked for the DNA result. I told her that I picked it up earlier the day, but I had not gotten through it yet as I've been busy. All the same, I noted that I did not need to because I knew who the father of my son was. I brought out the result and handed it over to my mother-in-law, and her eyes immediately lit up with excitement. I was about to take a bite of the delicious meal in front of me when she asked me to drop the spoon, take my child, and walk out of the house because I was not a part of that family. She told everybody present that I was the criminal she knew I was, and, well, the result had backed her claim. This was what gave her excitement. Everyone looked at me and expected Gerald to immediately start threatening a divorce and all that, but I dropped the bombshell. I told them that the result was negative because it's not my test, but that of Gerald would show that the father was not his biological dad. My mother-in-law wanted to deny the claim, but I asked her to look carefully at the details because in her excitement she just went straight up to the part of the results that read negative. When it dawned on my mother-in-law that her age-long secret had been found out, she starts making all kinds of excuses, but I told them how I'd heard everything about her and her friend, Madame Eunice, mocking my father-in-law for boasting with a son that wasn't even his. I didn't stop there. I brought out the pictures that have been given to me by the private investigator and told them that she had not only cheated on my father-in-law before they got married, but was currently doing the same. I then produced the DNA test result, which was carried out on our son, and it showed that he was indeed Gerald's. Everyone gasped in disgust, and it was a good thing my father-in-law did not have a heart attack. Gerald's mother came at me, but Gerald, who had been nursing his anger, came between us and pushed her to the ground. My father-in-law immediately asked Gerald to push her out of the house as well, and my husband wasted no time in doing so. He gathered the family together later on and told Gerald that he was his son regardless. He even noted that Gerald would accompany this managerial position that his mother had once the divorce proceedings are finalized, and he's even considering suing his wife for deceit that spanned over 20 years. One thing is for sure, she would lose all she had amassed, and her freedom was not guaranteed. If I have to be honest with you guys, this entire time I was just thinking to myself, is the mother-in-law acting this way because she's feeling inner guilt about her doing the exact thing that she's accusing OP of doing? I think that's really the gut instinct that I had, that she's just trying to cover up the inner guilt. I want to know what you guys think. I'm not excusing her for her actions, but I think this is what explains what led up to this point where she was ultimately exposed and the DNA that she read out was her own. Let me know your thoughts, guys, in the comment section down below. Let's discuss what you would have done in OP's position. My name's Mr. Reddito. I narrate stories like this every single day. If you do enjoy animated story readings, go ahead, subscribe to the channel. Check out the description below for some of my favorite playlists of some of my favorite stories, and also you can get access to my other channels as well. Thank you once again for joining me today. I hope you guys have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, and of course remember, it's cool to be kind. Peace.